So shout out to the monarchy.
Fascists in South America. Hands up.
Now listen, we should probably.
Wait. Be solemn.
I was going to say
a moment of silence.
We should probably police our tone a little bit because Queen Elizabeth is super dead.
Yeah.
She's as dead as you can possibly be.
Yeah.
Now,
I don't know. I mean, she just died, so she's probably still freshly decomposing. So that's actually life going on there. I don't realize that. There are organisms that are still alive to, when it's all down to bone, I think that's when we can really...
That's when you're the most dead?
Yeah.
Well, we were talking about this yesterday, and I have zero sympathy for monarchy. I think it's really strange that it even exists. Like, I don't understand the history of how...
Well, if it exists, it should just be, like, completely for show.
But it kind of is now.
I mean...
What I'm saying is, like...
talk to prime ministers and they do stuff and people have to go see them. It should be like Disney World, right?
Right. Like, we get to go into their castles and stuff. And okay. Well,
everyone takes pictures with them. They have to hold babies.
So she lived a super long time.
Yeah.
I didn't know that much about her, but yesterday, as I'm sort of following the news, I noticed the things that people keep saying are like, wow, when she ascended to the throne, Harry Truman was president.
Yeah.
There were 15 prime ministers during her reign. And these are all just like factoids about how long you lived, right? So I started to wonder, like, what are the things that she did? Because there were also a lot of people who seemed quite upset about this.
Well, and so what was her greatest accomplishment in her life?
Well, so I listened to the New York Times this morning.
Okay, I'm sure
the daily podcast, and they had a British guy on to sort of walk us through her reign. And he said, one night she fell asleep. This is a bad British accent. And she woke up queen on account of the fact that her father had died. So this is the origins story, right? You just are queen. And I guess I've watched too many Marvel movies, but I want somebody to get bitten by a radioactive spider or to fall into a vat of radioactive waste.
Or she had killed her father.
Right.
Earn it.
She chopped off the head of the would-be predecessor and ascended to the no, nothing like that. She just literally fell asleep and then woke up queen. And then the rest of it is sort of how the British Empire contracted post-World War II. And she basically took on a ceremonial role, and like, that's it. It's not like she was a champion for those former colonies. In fact, if you go to Belize,
Africa, quite.
Yeah, the stories are literally, he's like, and she traveled around the world and she met a lot of people, and it's like, okay, I mean, it sounds like a 90-year-long vacation to me. Where is the story of, like, in 1972, she was the first woman to invite an openly gay delegation and, whatever, like some pioneering rights or at the forefront of some fight. I didn't, and maybe it exists because I'm not a historian on a particular issue, but it seems like she was just kind of a lady whose dad died, and then she lived a really long time. That's the story.
Yeah, I mean, her greatest accomplishment in life was being born.
Yeah.
Right? Being pushed through the birth canal was the most trauma this woman has ever faced. So kudos to her. I guess she could have been worse. She could have been better.
Yeah.
But she was just there.
I will give her that. It does seem like this is one thing about famous people. When you hear somebody say, like, oh, I met Bryan Cranston and he was really nice. He smiled and said hello. We set a bar that's really pretty low for celebrities. And so a lot of the anecdotes about Queen Elizabeth are perfectly pleasant. Like, it seems like she was fine and probably nice to people that she ran into. But again, that's like, the baseline of human decency that we would hope from anyone. But maybe she was really remarkable, and behind the scenes, she did lots of cool stuff. But I don't know.
Yeah, it's nothing I can really give myself to care a lot about.
It's hard to relate to. I'll be honest. But so she's dead.
Yeah. I mean, she's not coming back.
Remember Rick Pitino?
Larry Bird's not walking through that door, fans.
Yeah. Queen Elizabeth's not walking through those doors. So anyway.
I mean, Larry Bird could walk through these doors. That would be something. Yeah. That would be a show.
If Larry Bird became the king of England?
No. If he walked through one of our doors and was on our podcast.
Right. That would be tight. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. No.
We wanted to talk about that because it's topical, right? People want to hear about what's in the news. But let's talk about some immigration stuff because that's presumably what this is about. First of all, we haven't done a show in forever. I feel like really last
time we did a show, we had a British attorney on here. And
yeah, she's probably super broken up about all this. So shout out to her.
Shout out to all our UK friends and chin up, as they say, carry on, whatever you guys do over there.
Mind the gap. Isn't that a thing?
Yeah. The only country in the world that actually has to tell people don't step into that hole between the train and the platform.
Right.
Is that a big problem in the UK?
People were super falling into that gap like all the time. All right. So
we'll talk about immigration.
Yeah. First of all, you're aware of Dark Brandon, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Basically, Joe Biden has done some stuff, and lo and behold, the voters wanted him to do some stuff. And so his numbers are going up. People are happy with him, and he's sort of feeling himself a little bit. On immigration, how would you, I don't know, we haven't talked about this at all, but where would you grade him from A to F, 1 through 10?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we have to give him credit for things the Attorney General does, right?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, he picked the Attorney General.
I mean, we slammed Trump for what Sessions and Barr did and those terrible decisions.
Sure.
Getting rid of matter of AB and putting back into place ACRG has been a lifesaver for so many of my clients. So right now I'm just taking a little break from putting together a packet for an upcoming master calendar hearing where normally I would just get an individual hearing date and then worry about filing everything later. But it's a really good domestic violence case from Honduras. And I kind of want to show the judge I'm ready to go get a date as soon as possible because I'm worried that if Biden loses and someone like Trump or DeSantis wins, that we could see this all end.
Right.
So we have to put that in a big plus.
Right. It's true that the number of times I've had this conversation with people that goes something along the lines of, right now we have sort of a chance, but Trump could be reelected in a couple of years and that could all go out the window. And so in light of the fact that I've had that conversation probably 100 times with potential clients or clients, just like you said, when we have certain types of cases, we do feel some pressure to try and get them filed and adjudicated as soon as possible. I guess you have to admit that there's been a change and it's material and it's affecting real people. So
yeah, and I mean, I know this isn't 100% true across the board, but I have not had very many clients. Actually, I haven't had any clients who have been picked up internally outside of people serving prison term.
Yeah, at least
so that's gone down. I mean, anecdotally for me, I know it happens.
For sure. But no, it's definitely true that the local enforcement efforts are more narrow than they were at the height of the Trump administration. I'm sure some of that is a function of local office practice too. But yeah, that's been a welcome change. They did recently publish the rules, right, for the DACA regulation. So they're trying to enshrine DACA into a regulatory scheme, which was sort of the critique and litigation all along against DACA, that it was just sort of like an executive action and that they didn't go through the proper rulemaking process. And I think you can criticize, Democrats in general for taking so long. Why did it take 10 years to do this when it was the obvious fix all along? But, it's getting done, and hopefully that can put an end to some
I assume it's going to be
litigation.
enjoined by some rando judge down in Texas. So we'll see.
Well, Matthew, judges are not political actors. Okay. So
My bad.
be serious. Okay.
So, and then I guess like Venezuela has TPS. He's extended TPS to more countries now, maybe not as quickly as people wanted.
Right.
Ukraine thing seems to be going okay. Afghanistan is still, I think, a mess. I know the employment side, people seem to be very unhappy with that. I don't actually give two shits because I don't do it.
Shout out to the employment side. I did see today that they've approved more employment green cards than I think ever before. But yeah, there's always
we'll have to like bite the bullet and have someone on to kind of explain it. We'll just mute ourselves, turn off our cameras, and do some work while we let them ramble on for 20 minutes.
About a perm or whatever. I still don't know what perm means. I think it's prevailing. Is it a prevailing wage? What is it?
It means permanent job.
Perm? Right? No. Shout out to our friends on the employment side. If you know what a perm is, leave it in the comments. Give us a like.
Yeah, subscribe on iTunes. Matt Galati's from the Philadelphia chapter, so maybe he can hit me up.
Fill us in. I think it's one of those things where obviously we can be happy with some of the stuff that we're seeing, but at the same time, like, there's no reason to fanboy about any of these people. There's always more that they could be doing that they're not doing. So it's important, I think, to keep pushing.
Well, I guess like new judges have been hired that should be better. I don't know. I would guess I would go a C.
A C.
And if people really wanted to argue about lower or higher, I would probably agree. I don't know. I think we're leaving a ton of stuff out. Like the Title 42 stuff is really a disgrace.
Right. It all depends too. Like, are we grading on a curve or like in a vacuum? I think
if you compare him to Trump, right, then maybe he's a B.
Right. And I also think that we have a little bit of Trump PTSD, not to take PTSD lightly, but at least for me, I know for a fact that I've forgotten a bunch of stuff that we went through, like the whole public charge, the I-944, where we had to get credit scores for intending immigrants and their family members and bank account statements and a summary of their debts and credit cards and all of these things. And that was one of the first things that they got rid of. And so, when you're comparing the two, and again, it was almost going to be impossible not to clear that bar. But when you compare the two, he's doing pretty good.
How do you think your relationship with like DHS attorneys have you noticed a change in their attitude?
Yeah, so I think it really depends. It depends on the attorney. We have some in Seattle who their position hasn't seemed to really change. They still don't really want to agree to anything. They take a very aggressive posture in every case, no matter what the equities. So there's going to be a couple of those. But the other sort of nicer attorneys are the ones who have a disposition that's a little bit softer, I guess, around the edges, are, of course, more willing to have conversations about cases, agreeing potentially to prosecutorial discretion. And as you know, for 4 years under Trump, there was basically no reason to ever talk to them.
Yeah.
Like, why would you even call an ICE attorney? Because if you had a case, for example, where you had to prove 10 years of continuous physical presence, and you had 400 pages of evidence, not that you would ever file that much, but let's just say, and you called them to try and get them to stipulate to continuous physical presence under the Trump administration, they would say no. Like, we're not going to agree to this thing that's very simple and well documented. So that's definitely changed.
Yeah, I've found for the most part them more willing to talk and to stipulate to things and all that. But I just have to go on a little bit of a rant about a local DHS office. So one of my clients, I didn't have the notice to appear. And she had every other document that they could have possibly given you when she comes over the border. She had the order to go report to ICE. She had her medical documents, everything. But she didn't have the notice to appear, which is very common. And she had entered in 2018, so even more common back then. So I said, hey, can you send me the notice to appear because I have to do these written pleadings? And also, if you make it a lot easier, if you can just send me the I-213. I-213 is a document that the CBP and ICE will produce to talk about your client, how they figured out that your client wasn't a U.S. citizen. And it has usually it's pretty standard information, but sometimes it has some stuff that's interesting on it. It might have an interview with them about when they crossed over, if they had fear or whatnot. So in order for them to prove their allegations, if you deny them or your client shows up or doesn't show up, they'll present this document to the judge. That's sort of evidence to support allegations that your client is removable. So I just ask him, so I don't have to bother to deny charges. If you can just send me the I-213, that would be great. So the guy immediately sends me a notice to appear, but says, we'll only provide the I-213 if it's necessary in course of litigation. It's so I reply back, I'm like, really? Now I have to just deny everything and then you'll be forced to file it. So why? Just send it to me now. And they just refuse. And then the week before in court, the judge asked me if I wanted to, my client already pled to the notice to appear. And she's like, do you want to redo the pleadings? And I'm like, listen, government attorney, can you just send me the I-213? And she's like, yeah, I'll file it with the court. No problem. I'm like, fine. Then I just pled I kind of want to get this case going. And then I noticed a week later she hadn't done so. So I emailed her. I'm like, hey, you said that you would file the I-213 with the court. Can you just, provide me with a copy? And she replied with, please tell me the reason you need the I-213.
Yeah.
Instead of and this is, I know maybe attorneys that practice other areas of law might be a little befuddled, but that common courtesy of just providing the information is very often not. Now, lots of times, a lot of government attorneys will just send me I-213.
Right.
And I don't understand. And it's like really, these little things get really frustrating because have you ever had a trial attorney ask you to send your filings that you've already filed in court because they don't have them?
Yeah, of course. Right.
And so you go and you email them, you scan them, you email them to them so they can be prepared.
Right.
And this happens all the time.
Just a professional courtesy. Well, there's also I've got a case in Detroit and I've got this pending PD request, and the government's position is going to make a huge difference on how we litigate the case, which is coming up. And I've called and I've tried to get the email for the trial attorney that the case has been assigned to, and they won't give it to me. And so when
is the case scheduled for?
Well, it's scheduled for January, but it's a case on remand where the underlying file is literally 8 inches thick, or we have a straightforward adjustment. And so we need to know, will you agree to adjustment and we can just do this in writing? It could be over literally tomorrow. Or are you going to want to dive into this big, long case from 2010 and get into the nitty gritty of that case?
Well, likely they won't have the attorney assigned to it until a week before or less. That's what happens in our local office.
Right. I mean, that's part of the problem. But, there is just, I think one of the things about having a 4-year Trump period is you do have a lot of attorneys who were either emboldened by that culture or who were literally brought in during that time period, and they have a certain sense of norms. And I just think of, for example, our local USCIS office. When I started, the local field office director, and it's a small office, but she was like, come do a tour. I'll introduce you to everyone. And she gave me her card and her direct line and was like, if you have any issues, just let me know. And it was a kind of situation where if there was something like we needed an emergency advance parole, or there was something really weird going on with the case, I could call her, and I didn't abuse that privilege. But there are times when the easiest way to fix something is to just call someone. And I tried to call the current field office director a few months ago, and he seems like a great guy, but somebody else answered, and she was like, "Where did you get this number?" It's like, well, I've been practicing 11 years. I've just always had this number. Well, don't call. You need to call the 800 number. And that's not necessarily a knock on this field office director as a person, but I do think he was brought in at a time when those were just the procedures and the standards, and those things, they either don't go away, even if you get a new president, or they take a really long time to sort of dissipate. But
let's talk about something that seems to be going away.
Which is?
Video hearings.
Oh, right.
And so for those who don't know, there's something in the immigration court called master calendar hearings, and there might be 30 to 50 or more cases on the docket for a morning or an afternoon. And in the old days, we would show up to court with our clients. We'd be jammed into
asses to ankles. Yeah.
And you might be there if the hearing started at 9, you might be there if you got there a little bit late until 11, 12 o'clock.
For a 5-minute hearing.
Yeah, 5 minutes. A 5-minute hearing would be a more complex.
And oftentimes these are families who are in proceedings together, or it's one person whose friend had to drive them and who couldn't get a babysitter. And so they've got 2 kids in tow. And
they have
so
to take off from work.
Yeah, there's babies crying and people all on top of each other. And, even before COVID, it was not a super pleasant experience. So
during COVID, they said, hey, let's set up this video conferencing system. And they also had what they call open voice, which is a telephonic conference system. And they said, hey, you know what? The immigrants don't need to show up if the attorney is there. So, I might have 3 cases. 2 of them might be in Newark and 1 might be in Philadelphia. And I would do everything from my desk. And while I'm online waiting, while other attorneys go, I can be doing work, drinking coffee, my breakfast, whatever I want to do. And I'm not driving 2 hours to Newark or even just to Philadelphia, which isn't that far, but it's still going to be a hassle. So it was really convenient, and I never had much of a problem with it. But Newark just recently, and I know courts across the country, are starting to say, you know what? Let's not do that anymore. Everyone has to come back. Now, to their credit, it's only attorneys. If you represent the respondents, the immigrants don't have to go. But they took something that seemed to be working very efficiently and was safe, and they're doing away with it, and they don't really have a good reason for why they're doing away with it. They just had a nationwide meeting on this, a WebEx meeting, a telephonic meeting. I don't know how they did it. They
didn't have to meet in person. That's weird.
Right. And their explanation was like, hey, we're just going to go back to the old ways because, that's what we're going to do. And
right.
There was in Newark, someone at the court complained that the ACIJ, the guy who's in charge, that the system was lagging or it would crash every once in a while. I never had that experience. But goes wrong when you're there in person. How many times have you been in court and the judge's computer freezes? Or they don't have or physically they don't have your file. They can't find your file. So you have to wait.
Right.
So it worked. And that's what bothers me. This is a system that was working that hey, you know what? Maybe it's not perfect, but let's play around with it. Let's see if we can fix it instead of just trashing it. So now Stephen has to drive 3 hours over the mountains for a 2-minute master calendar hearing in Seattle.
In the old days, I could pretty routinely get telephonic appearance for master calendar hearings. But there was one judge in Seattle who just decided he didn't like them. And so as long as the weather was okay and there wasn't snow on the pass, he would deny motions for telephonic because he wanted me to drive 6 hours in a day for a 5-minute hearing.
How would he know that there was going to be snow or not going to be snow on the day of your master?
If it was vaguely wintry time, he would grant it. And again, yeah, these are 5-minute hearings. And I think like with the connectivity issue, because I was in an individual hearing this week where DHS was appearing and they were super buffered and it was horrible. And I asked the judge, I was like, do we always look like this to you? Because if that's the case, like we should not be doing WebEx hearings. I mean, it was really bad. But then like in the old days, we had a Judge Zafonso. He was on the show once. He would grant telephonic appearance for people who live far away for master calendar hearings. But like if you abuse the privilege, like your phones weren't working or you made him call a bunch of times, he would just take you off the list of people who would be granted. So like there's no reason why they couldn't just say like, your internet's not good enough, you've got to come in person and then just do it on a case by case basis. But what's annoying is having the automatic option is nice because if I have a hearing tomorrow, but then my daughter gets sick, I'm supposed to file a motion now. And so I asked the judge, am I supposed to file a motion for WebEx appearance in literally every case as a just in case I can't come? And he's like, I mean, I guess, right? And so you're just going to be filing hundreds of 2-page motions that are all boilerplate. And, you know, the clerks are constantly complaining about how much work they have to do and, you know, how annoying everything is. And now they're just saying, okay, well, file a bunch of motions for no reason. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me, but.
Yeah, well, they have something in place that I maybe it was just like it was working too well and they're not used to it, you know?
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I mean, we'll see what happens. You know, I have a whole bunch of motions already set to go for it, but you know, I'm not really anxious to like go back into crowded courtrooms.
Right.
You know, for individual hearings, that's different because it's only you and very few people in there. But
yeah, and you can wear a good mask and then you're fine. But yeah, these are going to be crowded and annoying. So
what else is going on with immigration law?
Well, I did have an experience out of New York that I thought I would tell you about.
Okay.
Which is a little bit troubling. So they started doing electronic records of proceedings, which are actually super nice. We can log in and see the whole record, everything that's been scanned into the file, all the hearing notices, it's all been uploaded. And they're going back and they're sort of slowly working on older pending cases, but newer cases are sort of, as a matter of course, being uploaded into the system. And so, and actually now, if you get a case from another attorney, like Matthew does a job and I have to take over the case because they want a real lawyer, rather than filing a FOIA for the A file, I can email the court and they'll just upload the whole file to the online system. So it's really pretty convenient. That's another kind of neat little cool thing that they've done. But I had this master calendar hearing scheduled in New York. So I was, ready to wake up at 4 a.m. and get to the office by 5. And then I get a cancellation notice the day before saying, your hearing's been canceled. So great. I let the client know. The next morning I wake up and I'm exercising and it's like 6:10 in the morning and I get an email from the clerk saying, where are you? We're waiting for you. And so I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you're like wearing a hoodie and you know how you look in the morning. It's just not great. Your hair is not combed or anything. Not that that's not a problem for you, but anyways, so I throw on a shirt and I log into WebEx and there's like an ironing board in the background and, it's horrible. And I tell the judge I had a cancellation notice. And she said, well, I don't see anything. And I log into the electronic record of proceedings and it's not there. And so I'm like, this is weird. So I double checked my email and in fact, they had sent it. And then the clerk admits to the judge, well, I did send it, but it was an accident. And so I tried to get a hold of him and I couldn't. And I was like, well, I got your one email that you sent, this morning, like 5 minutes ago. But the clerk had uploaded this document and then gone back and deleted it from the record of proceedings, which seems like a big problem. But then I don't know, the judge and the clerk kind of turned on me and they're like, well, it's kind of your fault for some reason for, not answering your phone when we called you at 6 a.m. It was really strange, but that was kind of troubling.
Well, I mean, it was a master, right?
Right.
Wasn't there like a bunch of other attorneys?
Yeah, but presumably they emailed me like towards the end of the docket, because when I logged in, there was like one pro se family and then me. So I think they'd kind of gone through everyone and then emailed me. But the thing that sucks is like the clerk was telling the judge, like, yeah, I don't know where this attorney is. She hadn't told the judge that, by the way, I accidentally sent him a cancellation notice yesterday and then deleted it and then haven't heard from him since. And so the clerk was going to let the judge enter like an in absentia order, I'm pretty sure, if I hadn't logged in looking, disheveled and homeless.
I've had that before. I remember I had a judge call me for to call a reasonable fear interview. And this is after someone who had came in, she had been removed in the past, and she came back in, and at the border she claimed a fear, and the asylum office denied her fear, and then we do a reevaluation before the judge. And he called me, and I literally just got out of the shower. I was in a towel, and I don't even know how he got my cell phone number. He's like, "Oh, this is Judge Arthur calling from York." And I'm like, "Hey, how you doing?" He goes, "Oh, I got your client here for the reasonable fear interview, reevaluation, or whatever they call it, review." And I'm like, "What?" I had no idea. I had no notice. Can we maybe do this in an hour so I can get dressed or something? He's like, "No, we got to do it right now." So he
let you do it, but he let you do it telephonic.
Yeah. I mean, he called me. So, and this is years ago. He denied it. And then we ended up getting a reevaluation. She ended up getting withholding. So
nice.
Everything came. But I had another one where Judge Morley, who just from Philadelphia, just retired. He called me at my office and he's like, "Oh, Mr. Archibald, how are you?" I'm like, "Hey, Judge, I'm good. I'm going to be seeing you in the afternoon. What's up?" He's like, "No, you should be seeing me right now." And I put in a 9 o'clock that should have been a 1 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to call my client, and he was super nice about it, but it happens.
Do you have any other malpractice stories?
Sure. So many
malpractice stories. I did have a cool case this last week where this guy had been in proceedings from 2013 to last year. He had an individual hearing with another attorney. And in that time, all his qualifying relatives for cancellation had aged out. So there's a removal defense where you can win a green card, but you have to have qualifying relatives that include children under 21, spouses or parents with legal status. So the judge just denied his case and granted him voluntary departure. So we tried a motion to reopen, and we used some 10th Circuit case law and some unpublished board cases that say where there's extreme court delay that can be attributed to the court or ineffective assistance of counsel, the age of the qualifying relatives can be frozen as of the age of filing the application, which was in 2013. And the judge granted the motion. I was like, great. But we had no idea what his position was, like whether he thought the client actually qualified or what. And when we got to court, he was like, well, I granted it, and I'm assuming that you were filing this motion in order to do impact litigation, so that I can re-deny it and you can take it up to the 9th. And I was like, we mostly just filed to get this case reopened. But
Judge, I've been in your court before. You think I'm doing impact litigation?
I'm me, right? Anyway, so the government was open to admin closure, and I talked it over with the client, like, hey, do you want to be the vehicle to try and change 9th Circuit case law, or do you want to just walk away with the work permit? And
you took the work permit?
I took the work permit. So
selfish.
But if you're in the 9th Circuit and you've got a case like that, the judge seemed actually pretty I mean, he seemed kind of excited about it. Like, this is a good case for this sort of a thing. I mean, he didn't say that.
Why wouldn't he just grant it and let the government litigate it?
I mean, he was of the mind that because of Ninth Circuit case law, he could not grant it. And so, anyways,
Okay, this is boring now.
you're boring.
Anyways,
You.
we're boring, yeah. So basketball season starts soon. Are you excited?
Yeah, I'm in the annual sort of talk myself into the Trailblazers mode. You know,
They got Dame.
everyone's overlooking Damian Lillard, who was hurt all year. Everyone's overlooking Anthony Simons, who had a really good year.
Norman Powell should be good for you, right?
He got traded last year. Everyone's overlooking, you know, anyways. So, but they're in a nice little spot where if they're even kind of good, that will exceed expectations because they're not in anyone's list to be anywhere near the playoffs. So that's a good place to be. Let's go win 40 games and prove them wrong.
Shock the world.
Shock the world. Let's squeak into that 10th spot.
Yeah, I'm
Make the
getting
play-in
excited
game.
for the Sixers. So
Yeah, you know, James Harden's doing exercise this summer, so that's a good sign for you guys.
We got skinny beard, so we'll see. We'll see.
It was good chatting with you.
Yeah.
And we got to get a guest on next week. Talk about something
Next
juicy.
week.
By next week, I mean in another month from now.
You should probably maybe Matthew Hoppick, and we can talk about all that new stuff.
All his FOIA work. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a good kid.
All right, buddy. It was good talking to you.
All right, good night.
Yep. Bye.
Bye. We done?